Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Meredith Beavin, a pharmacist with a fascination for true crime, and I'm here with my wife and co host, Andy. Today, we're diving into the world of medications, the ones that can heal or turn deadly. So sit back, relax, listen, and learn. This is The Medicine Murders. Welcome back. I'm your host, Dr. Meredith Beavin, and I'm so thrilled you're here with me and my co-host / wife, Andy, for another deep dive into the world where healthcare meets true crime. This is our third episode. Do you know what that means, Andy?
Yes, and I'm very excited. So we made a bet that...
An agreement,
sure. That if we made it to 3 episodes, I would be allowed to have Meredith get a haircut. Because Meredith doesn't like to cut her hair into any different style than just long.
I've had the same haircut since I was maybe 10.
Yep. And I think it's time to change that.
Okay. So that was a deal if you were going to do this with me. We're going to keep going after this, but...
She's going to get a great shag haircut. Shout out to Sydney, our hairstylist.
So episode 3 special. Mm-hmm. So we made it to episode 3. Congrats, Andy. So listeners, whether you're folding laundry, walking the dog, or just kicking back with a coffee, thank you for spending this time with us. Before we deep dive into today's story, I want to take a moment to revisit some of the incredible questions and feedback we've received from previous episodes. Let's start with our very first episode, about Betty Bowman, and the role of colchicine in her tragic story. We talked extensively about gout, how it develops, the medical treatments available, and how colchicine works. But I realized we missed an important piece of the puzzle, the role diet plays in gout. So gout isn't just about genetics or medication. It's heavily influenced by what we eat and drink. Many foods contain purines, which are natural compounds found in your body and in certain foods. When purines are broken down, they produce uric acid. Normally, your body processes and eliminates uric acid without issue. But in gout, excess uric acid builds up, leading to painful joint inflammation. So, foods rich in purines, like red meat, shellfish, and alcoholic beverages, can raise uric acid levels, triggering painful flare-ups. Historically, gout was even nicknamed the disease of kings because of its association with indulgent diets. For anyone managing gout, dietary changes like cutting back on purine-rich foods and staying hydrated can make a big difference alongside medical treatments like colchicine. I want to clarify that up front because it's an important part of understanding and managing the disease. Now let's shift to episode 2, which covered Kenneth Barlow and the insulin murder of his wife. The feedback and questions you sent in were fantastic for that one as well. A lot of you wanted to know, when did Kenneth inject the insulin? How exactly did Elizabeth die? And what does hypoglycemia feel like? So we can assume, or take an educated guess, that Kenneth injected the insulin either late at night or early in the morning, likely while Elizabeth was asleep or incapacitated. He used his nursing knowledge to administer the drug subcutaneously, or under the skin, which allowed it to absorb slowly into her bloodstream, causing a prolonged and deadly drop in her blood sugar. So Elizabeth's death was caused by severe hypoglycemia. This condition deprives the brain of glucose, its primary energy source, leading to confusion, seizures, coma, and then ultimately death. It's a silent and terrifying process. And what does hypoglycemia feel like? Many of you ask this, and it's an important question. Early symptoms are subtle but unsettling: weakness, dizziness, sweating, and an overwhelming sense of anxiety or confusion. As condition worsens, victims may experience trembling, a rapid heartbeat, blurred vision, and difficulty thinking clearly. Without immediate treatment, hypoglycemia escalates into seizures, unconsciousness, and eventually death. I think, Andy, do you want to talk about how you feel?
Sure.
When you enter hypoglycemia?
Yeah, so my personal experience, at least the way my body reacts with hypoglycemia, is typically I notice because I start to get a little brain fog going on, and then typically I'll start to get pretty warm. I do feel the sweats a lot. That's usually what I feel. And I can tell because I start to feel almost like I'm vibrating. I'm not necessarily shaking quite yet, but it's like a tremor. And then I'll also have a lot of issues usually with like irritability. I start to get like a little snappy or a little upset. And if it does go a long time, I've been known to be quite stumbly. It's hard for me to walk. So it can get to a pretty scary place. And I think the interesting thing is a lot of people expect you to bounce back pretty quickly after that. But I tell people, honestly, you're almost dying. Maybe like once or twice a week, which is crazy. But yeah, I thankfully know relatively well the signs for my body, but everyone's different. Some people have varying experiences, but that's just how mine tends to come in.
And you use Dexcom, a CGM or continuous glucose monitor.
Yep.
We can talk about that a little bit. I'm going to talk about it at the end of this.
Okay.
But do you want to talk about how that machine, we can take this out too if you don't, but do you want to talk about how that machine kind of has trained your body to not feel those things anymore?
So it's interesting, but because the machine basically tests your blood sugar about every 5 minutes or so. So it'll update you in real time on what your blood sugar is and where it's trending, whether it's going up, down, staying consistent, whatever. And I have found, and I've talked to a couple other diabetics who feel similarly, but because you no longer have to rely on your body, you kind of start to lose touch with what it actually feels like versus just allowing the machine or your phone to tell you what you're supposed to feel like, which in my opinion isn't like the best thing ever, just because, there's definitely times that, machines fail us and they're not always exact. So I do prefer to try and continue to recognize when I feel low. But yes, sometimes that can lead to kind of a disconnect between your body and your mind because you're allowing something else to kind of take over that for you.
Yeah, until you mentioned that, I actually never thought about that, but that does make sense. You are now relying on something else besides your body, so you can train yourself. Super interesting, but I will cover all that stuff at the Talk Nerdy part. The machines we use in diabetes, because diabetes is such a big subject. I think I squeezed a lot into the last episode, which might have been overwhelming. So we're going to revisit a little bit in this episode, and we're going to ask you more questions. Andy's pop quiz, your favorite part. So now we kind of figured out kind of the missing pieces in episode 1 and 2. Hopefully, I can answer all the pieces in this episode, and we don't have to revisit it. But I'm learning, so hopefully, I did a little bit of a deeper dive on this one. So let's see. So Kenneth Barlow's case. It showed us how someone could misuse medical knowledge to weaponize a life-saving drug, turning trust into betrayal within the confines of a marriage. But what happens when this kind of treachery occurs on a larger scale? Within the very institutions designed to care for and protect our most vulnerable. And this brings us to today's case. It's a heavy one, and I am sorry. As a healthcare provider, I do not like these cases. But I find them interesting, and we should learn from them.
Yeah.
So today's case is of Heather Pressdee, a haunting reminder that danger can sometimes hide in the very places meant to offer safety and care. Over 3 years, Heather manipulated her access to life-saving medications to commit acts of murder and attempted murder, shattering the lives of the patients and families who trusted her care. Today we venture into one of the most shocking cases in recent history. Heather Pressdee was a licensed nurse, a profession synonymous with compassion and healing. Yet instead of saving lives, she used her position to harm those who depended on her. This story isn't just about a nurse who killed, it's about the fragile trust we place in caregivers and the hidden dangers that can lurk in plain sight. We'll explore Heather's journey from her early life to her career as a nurse, her trail of crimes, and the investigation that finally brought her to justice. Behind her composed demeanor lay a calculated pattern of manipulation, control, and murder. I do want to mention that first episode was a 32-year-old pharmacist, blonde, just like me. The second episode was about diabetes, kind of related to you. Well, really related to you, really. And now this episode takes place in Pennsylvania. Allegheny County, to be exact, where I went to school at Duquesne. And I still work in Pennsylvania. I work in central Pennsylvania. I live in Baltimore. I drive an hour up to my job there. So I'm related to this. I know a lot of where this story takes place, which is real strange. I'm picking a lot of stories close to home. So let's begin by stepping back to understand the events that shaped Heather Pressdee and the choices that turned her from caregiver to a killer. Heather Pressdee was born on August 28th, 1982, and raised in Natrona Heights, Pennsylvania, a small community just north of Pittsburgh. Growing up, Heather's life was relatively unremarkable. She was the youngest of 3 siblings in a working-class family. Neighbors remembered her as a quiet child who often stayed in the background. Teachers described her as polite but unexceptional, someone who never quite stood out. Heather's adolescence was marked by struggles to fit in. She lacked close friendships and often kept to herself. While others her age were busy with sports or social activities, Heather preferred solitude, spending much of her time at home. Some former classmates recalled her as odd, citing her withdrawn demeanor and occasional bursts of defensiveness when questioned. By her early 20s, Heather's life seemed directionless. She worked a series of low-paying retail jobs, none of which she kept for long. Friends noted that she seemed restless, as if searching for something more meaningful. It wasn't until her early 30s that she finally found what she thought was her calling, nursing. In 2014, at the age of 32, Heather enrolled in a local nursing program. For the first time, she appeared to have found her purpose. Her instructors describe her as competent, if not particularly passionate. She wasn't a star student, but she passed her exams and earned her license without incident. She secured her first position at a rehabilitation hospital in 2018, working with patients recovering from strokes, surgeries, and other major medical events. But almost immediately, cracks began to show. Heather's career in nursing spanned multiple healthcare facilities across Western Pennsylvania over a 5-year period. While frequent job changes aren't unusual in healthcare, Heather's pattern of moving between positions raised questions that no one pursued deeply enough at the time. These transitions allowed her to continue her work unchallenged, leaving a trail of harm and suspicion in her wake. So the first one was Encompass Health Rehabilitation Hospital of Harmarville in Harmarville, Pennsylvania. She worked there about 6 months from 2018 to 2019. This was her first nursing position at Encompass Health and focused on stroke recovery and post-surgical care. Her time there was short-lived. Staff noticed troubling behavior, though, including frequent medication discrepancies, particularly with insulin. Heather was dismissed just after 6 months for failing to adhere to proper medication protocols. While no specific deaths were tied to her at the time, her colleagues remembered her as defensive and resistant to collaboration. Then she moved to her second workplace, Concordia at Rebecca Residence in Allison Park, Pennsylvania. She worked there from 2020 to 2021 for about a year. At Concordia, Heather began exhibiting more overtly concerning behavior. Colleagues reported missing medication entries in patient charts and unapproved interventions. She often justified her actions by claiming she was acting in the patient's best interests, even when these actions contradicted physician orders. During Heather's shifts, several elderly residents unexpectedly passed away. These deaths were attributed to natural causes at the time, but investigators later revisited them as part of a larger pattern. Her third place of employment was Bel Air Healthcare and Rehabilitation in Lower Burrell, Pennsylvania. From about 2021 to 2022, she stayed there about 10 months. Heather's role at Bel Air gave her greater access to patients and control over medications as an assistant director of nursing. Her tenure saw a string of patient deaths, many following rapid declines in residents who had previously been stable. Staff began to grow suspicious, particularly after noticing missing insulin vials. However, Heather resigned before an internal investigation could be completed. Can I tell you a story?
Yeah.
When I was an intern for pharmacy, we had, because you might be thinking, how does this go on for so long? Which is, I know it's crazy, but you have to think of like how much is actually going on. So like even in like a small, I work for CVS, and so even like a small retail pharmacy, we had a technician, a man, I'm not going to say where, but he was stealing Viagra, generic Viagra. So he was ordering a bunch through Cardinal.
Yeah.
And then, but instead of like checking it in, like when you get the order from Cardinal, you check it in on the computer. And instead of checking it in that we got it, he would say we didn't get it. And he would like just put it in his pockets.
Oh, wow.
And so like after, I think it took like 6 or 7 months of being like, why are we never getting this medication in?
Yeah.
I was just an intern at the time, but the pharmacy manager finally was like, let me just check the cameras because I don't know what the heck's going on. Like Cardinal can't be missing only Viagra every delivery. And so after looking at the cameras, they saw him just taking it out of the package and sticking in it, then going to his car and then coming back. And obviously he just continued on with his shift.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that this is as big as this,
Right.
but even in a big setting, I can see it shouldn't happen though.
There's a lot of moving parts, I'm sure, and like you can't always be concerned about what somebody else is doing if you
have
your
to
own
trust
stuff
them,
to
which
do,
is really tough. Like, imagine having to trust, like even as a pharmacist, I have to trust my technicians. Like, I have to hope, I have to try. I mean, I have to 100%. How can I not trust them and then continue on my day?
Right.
I have, because I can't watch them 24/7.
Right.
So, I mean, there's just an inherent trust if you work in this setting that you're going to at least try. Accidents happen.
Oh, for
but
sure.
you're at least 100% going to try and do the right thing.
Right.
But it's scary. And just little stuff, even something as little as like that.
Yeah.
You'd think that we'd catch on. Well, I wasn't in charge. I probably would have caught on a little sooner, but I would hope I will. I have no idea. I would have hoped.
It's hard. I mean, and there's so many people who have mistrust in like medical professionals
To begin with.
and I get why.
And I think you should. I think you should have a mistrust in almost everything if you're, like, even in the seatbelt on your car, like, and drive safely. Just because you're wearing a seatbelt, I'm not going to drive crazy.
Right.
But I would just have a mistrust inherently because you need to look out for yourself. But does that mean you have to go into a hospital and question everything that everyone does? No. But I would definitely at least be an advocate for yourself 100%. I believe in that.
Yeah. I mean, definitely always get second opinions and
yeah, if you feel uncomfortable,
just don't take everything at face value. That's really all you can do.
Yeah. Even in a pharmacy, if the medicine looks different, ask us. If there's a question, ask us. If you want us to redo something, we'll do it. We're there to work with you. I know it seems tough in a retail setting. Like we're not there for patients, but we are. We're just busy at the same time. But we stop and we'll help you.
Even you guys, you're on the ground level of basically the medical field, and it kind of lends itself to people being able to ask you questions about things, even if they necessarily can't get to a doctor or can't get to, an urgent care for things that are mostly minor, of course. But it definitely, you have to have some level of trust in that. And I think it's interesting, even as an outsider, to see, like, yes, there are people like you who are really, really dedicated, but, obviously there's people who aren't. This is just a job and this is just something that they do. And so they don't have as much in it to care, really. And the thing I think I find interesting is that as someone who loves their job, I'm not going to say what it is, but as someone who loves their job, I just always find it interesting when people do things that they absolutely hate. If you can at least get through it for 8 hours of the day and be neutral about it, you probably shouldn't be doing it. But
life is
all that to say that we really need more pharmacists. Please.
Oh, 100%.
Go to school to be a pharmacist if you're smart enough. Please. There's not enough of them.
There isn't. You're right.
I'm not smart enough to do that, but somebody is.
Everyone is understaffed and overworked, so give your retail pharmacist a break.
Yep.
They're trying their hardest, I promise. At least I am. That being said, like, just for example of an intervention, just this week I did, there was an elderly lady, I think she was like 84, and she had severe allergies to amoxicillin and Bactrim, and she could only take medications like doxycycline or levofloxacin, for instance. And the nurse asked her husband, does she have any allergies because she does have dementia? And the husband said no.
Oh, no.
So the nurse prescribed a 30-day course of Augmentin because she has a very bad skin infection, and then a 15-day course of Bactrim. And then when they came to pick it up, her daughter came to pick it up for her. I mentioned, doesn't she have an allergy to these two medications? And the daughter was like, oh, man, absolutely. Is that what the nurse prescribed? And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm not going to sell these to you, and we'll contact the nurse and we'll get something different. So we contacted the nurse, so we got 2 other medications that she can take. And even that little bit of an intervention it happens 47 times a day,
Yeah.
and people don't even know.
I mean, pharmacists don't just fill medication. I think that's
I
the
actually
thing.
don't fill medicine at all.
Yeah.
If you look back there, our pharmacists, we're not counting, I promise.
Yeah.
We're looking.
Doing a lot of other stuff.
We're looking at prescriptions, looking at people, listening to conversations. But I digress. Be nice to your retail pharmacist. We'll move on. We'll go back to the story. But I think this is a good story of how things like this can happen for a good amount of time, and the healthcare system being so overworked, understaffed, that things go by, and it shouldn't. So something that we definitely need to work on. So back to Heather. This is her fourth employment. Okay, we did 1, 2, 3. Number 4 was Quality Life Services in Chicora, Pennsylvania. She started there in 2022, and she worked there for about 6 months. At Quality Life Services, Heather's tenure was brief but troubling. Several patients experienced sudden hypoglycemic episodes despite having no history of diabetes or need for insulin. One patient fell into a coma but narrowly survived after emergency intervention. Before an official review could begin, Heather left the facility on her own terms. Her 5th place of employment was Sunnyview Rehabilitation and Nursing Center in Butler, Pennsylvania. She worked there in 2023 for about 4 months. Sunnyview was Heather's final known place of employment and the site of her most egregious crimes. Here, she targeted multiple patients, administering insulin to those who didn't need it. Over just 4 months, 3 deaths were directly linked to her actions. Her pattern of behavior had become impossible to ignore, and Sunnyview staff reported their concerns to authorities, sparking the investigation that ultimately brought her justice. Let's just do a little refresher. So, Heather's weapon of choice was insulin, a hormone essential for managing blood sugar in diabetic patients, which we learned last episode. Hopefully you guys learned something. When administered to non-diabetic patients or in excessive doses, insulin causes hypoglycemia, a rapid and often fatal drop in blood sugar, which you all should be pros in now. Heather exploited this fact, targeting vulnerable patients who were unlikely to question her actions. Her knowledge of how insulin worked gave her control over her victims' fates while maintaining an outward appearance of care and competence. In May 2023, after months of investigation, Heather Pressdee was arrested at her home in Natrona Heights, Pennsylvania. The neighborhood was quiet as law enforcement arrived, a stark contrast to the grim charges that would soon be revealed. Heather was reportedly cooperative but unnervingly calm as detectives laid out the evidence against her. Investigators had compiled a damning case, uncovering a pattern of unexplained deaths and medical anomalies during Heather's shifts. Key pieces of evidence included surveillance records. Heather was present during several unexplained deaths and medical emergencies. Medication logs where insulin vials were consistently unaccounted for during her shifts. Autopsy reports where multiple patients were found to have died from hypoglycemia despite having no history of diabetes. Eyewitness accounts where staff at Sunnyview Rehabilitation and Nursing Center have reported concerns about Heather's behavior. When detectives arrived at her door, Heather showed no visible emotion. Detective Karen Fields, who led the arrest team, later remarked, "She didn't flinch. No tears, no outrage. It was like she had been waiting for us." That's a creepy quote.
Wow. Yeah.
Initially, Heather denied any wrongdoing, describing the deaths as tragic coincidences. But as detectives laid out their evidence, her composure began to crack. After hours of questioning, Heather confessed to injecting insulin into multiple patients, claiming she was, quote, easing their suffering. Her tone during the confession was described as disturbingly detached. Detective Fields noted she truly believed she was the hero of the story, but there was no remorse, no acknowledgement of the families she destroyed. The investigators, however, were not convinced by her claims of mercy. Detective James Monroe summarized their conclusion as, I quote, "This wasn't mercy, it was control. She chose who lived and who died, and she did it because she could. This wasn't compassion, it was cruelty." Heather was charged with 17 counts of first-degree murder, 5 counts of attempted murder, and multiple counts of aggravated assault. Heather's trial began in early 2024, attracting national attention. The case highlighted systemic vulnerabilities in long-term care facilities and the devastating consequences of unchecked power and caregiving roles. Families of the victims packed the courtroom, many clutching photos of their loved ones. The prosecution built a meticulous case, presenting overwhelming evidence to prove Heather's guilt, with medical records and witness testimonies from colleagues who described Heather as cold and controlling. One nurse testified, and I quote, "She always seemed to be there when something went wrong. At first, I thought it was bad luck. Now, I know better," end quote. Surviving victims Like family members and patients who survived Heather's actions recounted their harrowing experiences. An 83-year-old stroke survivor tearfully testified, and I quote, "I trusted her to help me get better. Instead, she nearly killed me." End quote. The jury deliberated for less than a day, returning a unanimous guilty verdict on all charges. On May 15, 2024, Heather Pressdee was sentenced to, before I say this is how you sentence people.
Yeah.
This is how you put someone who killed people away.
Right.
3 consecutive life terms without parole for the murders, and an additional 380 to 760 years for the attempted murders. That's an appropriate sentencing.
Yes.
100%.
You killed multiple people.
Yes.
And tried to kill so many more.
Sometimes I see sentencing and I'm just dumbfounded.
Well, and I think the problem also, at least in our society, is that when we think of victims who are, like, left alive, even if it's a super heinous attack.
Oh, yeah. I think they should be weighted the same because it's like punishing the victim for surviving.
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. It's like, why?
It's like, oh, the victim survived, so the person who did the harm gets less of a... So they lucky for surviving, unlucky for having less sentencing to whoever caused the harm.
No justice served.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm not a lawyer, or a judge.
True.
I don't know the justice system too well, but I do believe that the sentencing for Heather was appropriate.
Yes.
380 to 760 years seems appropriate to me.
And I'm glad to hear that because I do feel like a lot of times in these cases it's not.
I mean, even Kenneth Barlow got out after 26 years.
So I think I'm glad to hear that they took it seriously.
It's appropriate, for sure. I hope she never gets out. In this scathing sentencing statement, Judge Robert Henning addressed Heather directly, saying, and I quote, "Your actions were a betrayal of trust and a gross violation of the oath you took as a nurse. You exploited the vulnerability of those in your care for your own twisted sense of control. This court will ensure you never have the opportunity to harm another soul." End quote. And Heather remained impassive as the sentence would read, showing no visible reaction to her fate. So, behind every name in Heather Pressdee's wake is a life, a family left shattered by her betrayal. Authorities eventually attributed 17 deaths and 5 attempted murders to her actions. So, let's meet a few of the people whose lives were destroyed. Gerald was a proud man in his 90s, known for his resilience and devotion to his family. A retired steelworker from Pittsburgh, Gerald spent most of his life working long, hard hours in the mills to provide for his family, his wife, and his 3 children. Despite the physical toll of the lifetime of labor, Gerald retained his sharp wit and his love for life, finding joy in the simplest moments, whether that was spending time with his children or working in the garden. In late 2022, Gerald suffered a stroke that left him weakened but still determined to recover. His daughter Susan was heavily involved in his care and would visit him regularly at Sunnyview, where he had been transferred to undergo physical therapy. Susan recalled her father's optimism in the face of his struggles, saying, and I quote, "He was talking about coming home. He wanted to see his grandkids and work in the garden again," end quote. But on the night of March 25th, 2023, that hope was extinguished. Gerald was found unresponsive in his bed, and despite efforts to revive him, he passed away. His death initially was ruled as complications of his stroke, but in the aftermath of the investigation, it was revealed that Heather had injected Gerald with insulin during her shift, despite his lack of any history of diabetes. His death, along with several others, would become a key part of the investigation. One of her next victims was James, who went by Matt Bartow, age 55. Matt Bartow was the youngest of 5 siblings and known as the comedian of the family. His infectious sense of humor and love of fishing made him the heart of every family gathering. Despite being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and battling kidney failure, Matt always maintained an upbeat attitude. His health had deteriorated over the years, and by 2021, had a serious infection. He was moved to the Belair Healthcare and Rehabilitation Center for closer monitoring and rehabilitation. In late 2022, his health was finally stabilizing, and his family, including his sister Emily, were hopeful he'd be able to return home soon. I quote from Emily, "Matt kept talking about going fishing again. It was one of the things he was looking forward to the most," end quote. But on the night of December 4th, 2022, everything changed. While Matt's diabetes was well managed and under control, Heather, who was working the night shift, administered a lethal dose of insulin. Matt slipped into a coma and passed away soon after. Emily was devastated when the truth came out and said, I quote, "We thought it was just his illness, but to find out that she chose to take him from us, well, That broke something in all of us, an end quote. The third victim was Nicholas Symbol, age 43, and her youngest victim. Nicholas Symbol, a talented artist and musician, had his life tragically altered by a car accident. The crash left him with a traumatic brain injury that severely affected his mobility and cognitive abilities. Despite these challenges, Nicholas's vibrant spirit remained. Before the accident, Nicholas had been a well-known figure in his local art community, and after the accident, he found solace in drawing and playing his guitar. His family described him as the light of their lives, always bringing joy to those around him. His mother, Linda, called him, and I quote, the soul of our family. Nicholas had been staying at Sunnyview Rehabilitation and Nursing Center for several months, receiving around-the-clock care and rehabilitation. Despite his challenges, he remained hopeful for a brighter future. Linda fondly recalled how Nicholas would light up when he received visits from family, always eager to share his latest sketches. On May 1st, 2023, Nicholas's promising future was cut short. During Heather's shift, he was injected with insulin despite not needing it. He was found unresponsive the next morning, and his death was later attributed to the insulin overdose. Linda was heartbroken, and she said, I quote, "She didn't just kill my son. She killed our joy, our family's future. Nicholas trusted her. We trusted her. And she betrayed our trust in the worst possible way." And end quote. Heather's lack of emotion throughout the hearing only deepened the family's anger. One relative shouted, and I quote, "Look at us. Look at what you've done," end quote, as she was escorted out of the courtroom. In his closing remarks, Judge Henning addressed the victims' families. And I quote, "The pain you endured is unimaginable. And while the sentencing cannot bring your loved ones back, it ensures that the person responsible for this horror will never harm another. Let this case serve as a reminder of the sacred trust placed in caregivers and the devastating consequences when that trust is broken," end quote. Heather Pressdee's crimes were a devastating abuse of trust, turning a profession built on compassion into a means of harm. As chilling as these stories are, they also serve as an opportunity to educate ourselves about the tools and treatments that should protect lives rather than end them. In episodes 2 and 3, we've seen how insulin, a life-saving medication, has been used to devastating effect. Understanding diabetes and the treatments involved not only highlights the complexities of managing the condition, but also underscores the importance of protecting medical tools from misuse. Now that we've explored the tragic consequences of insulin misuse, let's dive deeper into the science behind diabetes and its treatments. Understanding how diabetes is diagnosed and managed is crucial, not just for those living with the condition, but for everyone, as it helps us appreciate the importance of safeguarding life-saving medications and technology. So, Andy, it's your favorite part. Mm-hmm. Are you excited for talking to her? I know that was a heavy case.
That was a lot, yeah.
But I am glad for one thing that she confessed and she was found guilty and she got correct sentencing.
Yeah.
But healthcare worker cases, like angels of death, are not fun for me.
No.
As a healthcare worker, I can't. Even when accidents happen, I feel like a miserable human being. So I can't even imagine doing something on purpose.
Yeah.
And I don't know how people do that. But moving on to my favorite part, the talk nerdy part.
Yes.
Are you excited?
To me.
All right, we're going to start with a pop quiz from last episode. I think you're going to nail it.
Okay.
It's about our most popular at the time, Ozempic. Mm-hmm. So what class of medicine does Ozempic belong to? Ain't no shot you're getting this, huh?
No.
If you guys could see Andy's face now.
It's semaglutide.
That's
a type.
Wow.
That's a type.
No, so semaglutide, that was awesome. Semaglutide, so that's awesome. Semaglutide is like if Ozempic had a generic, it's the active medicine.
Okay.
So
yeah.
Ozempic is semaglutide. They're the same thing. Okay. But we're talking about the class it belongs to.
Okay.
Any hope at all?
No.
Okay, what if I gave you multiple choice?
Okay,
This is for the audience too. So I'm going to say a multiple choice, and you're going to tell me, and we'll see if the audience remembers anything from the last episode. Because education's all about retention.
Yeah.
We learn, we retain, we answer questions.
Yep.
Right? Okay, so A, is it a sulfonylurea? B, is it a GLP-1 receptor agonist? Or C, is it a DPP-4 inhibitor?
I think it's a GLP-1, whatever it is.
Receptor agonist. You got it. And for bonus points, do you know what it does?
I know it regulates blood sugar. It promotes weight loss, and it will slow down your digestion.
Correct. Yep. So that's why a lot of people you take Ozempic.
I've taken it, yeah.
Yeah,
on
and
off,
you know that while taking it, it's hard to finish a meal. Actually, a big complaint from you is the reason you don't inject insulin before a meal is because while on Ozempic, you're not sure how much you're going to finish.
Right.
Which is extremely interesting. They should probably do some. Maybe I'll make maybe I'll have a study of that.
Yeah.
Because how do you know how much insulin to inject if you don't know how much you're going to eat because your Ozempic makes you not eat as much.
There's been times I eat like one chicken strip and I'm over it.
Yeah,
like
but you might have dosed for 4 chicken strips, for instance.
And trying to choke down even like sugar tablets or a soda or anything makes you feel really sick sometimes.
It makes you, really just not. Food is disgusting at that point.
That's the thing, yeah. It's not only that it like shuts off your desire for food, it almost turns your desire for food. You don't even want the food. It looks gross, it smells gross, it tastes gross. And sometimes I'll even, when I was on it more consistently, I would even really, really, really want something. And
that's why it promotes weight loss so well.
Yeah.
It kind of shuts off that food drive.
Right.
So that's how that works. I'm going to give you 50% credit.
Okay.
Because you got it wrong.
I tried.
You got it right, but you needed a multiple choice.
Right. 75%. Let's be in the middle there.
Today we'll explore critical tools used to manage diabetes, starting with diagnostic tests that are in the first line of defense in identifying the condition, followed by treatment guidelines and the advanced devices that make diabetes management more effective than ever. So these tests, have you ever heard about, you're type 1 diabetic, so have you ever heard about the tests that we use to diagnose type 2, type 1 diabetics?
Somewhat, but I was really young when I was diagnosed, so I probably wouldn't remember too much about that. And I know that my diagnosis story is not very typical, so I also don't really know if I would have figured that out anyway.
Oh, true. Okay. So, diagnostic tests, why are they so important? So, early and accurate diagnosis is essential to prevent complications, essentially, right? So, we have a couple of diagnostic tests. One is fasting blood sugar, which this test measures blood sugar levels after like an overnight fast. And you have a couple readings. So, normal would be below 100 milligrams per deciliter. Milligrams per deciliter is just how we measure blood sugar. Pre-diabetes is 100 to 125. And then diabetes is over 126 or higher on 2 separate tests. So if that just happens on one test, they'll have you come back and do another test.
Right.
The second test is HbA1c, which reflects your average blood sugar levels over the past 3 months. Your normal would be below 5.7%. Your pre-diabetes would be 5.7 to 6.4%. And your diabetes would be 6.5% or higher. And then 3, you have your oral glucose tolerance test. This measures blood sugar 2 hours after drinking a glucose solution. And it's pretty simple. If your glucose after 2 hours is over 200 milligrams per deciliter or higher, you have diabetes. Then you have your random blood sugar test. A random blood sugar test can help diagnose diabetes if the reading is high and accompanied by symptoms like excessive thirst, urination, or unexplained weight loss. And that's kind of the same as our glucose tolerance test. It's just if you have diabetes, if it's over 200 milligrams per deciliter or higher. So why is catching diabetes early matter? So catching diabetes or prediabetes early allows for, especially prediabetes, allows for lifestyle changes and medication to prevent complications or for prediabetics to progress to diabetes. Last episode, we kind of talked about how in some cases it can be reversed if you're pre-diabetic.
For type 2 specifically.
Type 2. Yes. Type 1, of course, cannot be reversed.
Right.
With regular monitoring, individuals can manage their blood sugar levels and reduce the risk of emergencies like hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia. Early intervention is key to long-term health and well-being. Now, let's look at how diabetes is treated differently depending on the type. So type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune condition. We kind of covered this in the last episode. And it is treated with what, Andy?
Insulin.
Insulin. That's right. We're going to use insulin because your body lacks it. So we talked about the kinds. We have our bolus, our basal. But for this episode, we're going to talk about some insulin delivery methods. Alrighty? So you got your pens, you got your needles, right?
Yeah.
You got your vials, you use with your needles.
Yeah.
But you also have your fancy insulin pumps, which you're taking a break right now. But you usually do use an insulin pump for the most part. And your insulin pump is Tandem, a T-Slim.
T-Slim, yeah. I've used T-Slim, and I've used, what was the name of the other? Medtronic. But there's a lot of them, you know. There's Omnipod, there's...
Omnipod was I was going to mention next. So Omnipod is actually a device that you remove after a couple, it's I think 2 to 3 days. Some people have 2 days because it only holds a certain amount of insulin. I think it's 300 units. The smaller ones might be around 200 units.
Right.
Which for someone with type 1 diabetes, they may go through 100 units a day. So if the Omnipod only holds 200 to 300 units, you're changing that every 2 to 3 days.
Yeah.
But that's continuous insulin delivery. And then you have your monitoring. So you have your CGMs, or continuous glucose monitors, which we briefly mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
You use Dexcom, but there's alternatives. You have Freestyle. Freestyle Libre. Freestyle makes a couple types. They have 14-day, Freestyle 2, Freestyle 3, and the brand new Freestyle 3 Plus, which is causing me a lot of issues right now in retail pharmacy. Because maybe a lot of people don't know, when something new comes out, it's kind of hard to get.
Yeah.
Or it's very easy to get, but the old ones are hard to get.
Right.
So right now, Freestyle Libre 3 Plus is extremely easy to get, but a lot of people haven't transitioned to that yet. Their prescriptions are still for Freestyle Libre 3, which your local pharmacist can't just change.
Right.
So right now, Freestyle Libre 3 is very hard to get. It's on a back order. It's been that way for ever since Freestyle Libre 3 Plus came out. And people are just going without, which is unfortunate. But in order to switch to the other one, Freestyle Libre 3 Plus, we do need to get a new prescription from your doctor. So I've just been advising people to have a prescription for both on hand.
Right.
So whatever we get, we can use.
Yeah.
And CGMs allow for real-time glucose tracking and reduce the need for frequent finger stick tests. There is a newer version of this, which hopefully Andy will get soon once it comes out. But
at some point.
Yeah. If you want to talk about it, I know you're very hyped about it, Andy.
Yeah. The Eversense. Right now, not many endocrinologists carry it. But it's something that I definitely would like to look to, mostly because I know a lot of my issues with diabetes is the fact that most of these things are not necessarily removable from the body all the time. They're kind of always on you. The nice thing about the Eversense is it's an implant under the skin, and so what happens is the part that goes on top that actually sends the transmission of all your blood sugar readings to, like, your phone or whatever they're using, can come on and off. So it's nice in the sense that you can take it off when you want to shower, or when you're about to do some, something that maybe you don't want it to interrupt you, whatever. But it is nice because my big issue is I hate the fact that it's on during the shower when I want to scrub every inch of my body.
So I didn't even think about that. So let's talk about the disruption of CGMs.
Yeah.
So, and it's a huge complaint I hear from patients at retail as well. So for those who don't know, or don't know anyone with diabetes, haven't been around it, I talk about it like this because I live with you.
Right.
So I see the ins and outs. It doesn't even cross my mind. Right. So writing this, it didn't cross my mind. But when someone with diabetes is wearing this, it's on their skin. So Dexcom is 10 days.
Right.
Freestyle is 14 days. Freestyle Libre 3 Plus is 15 days. And Omnipod's 3 days. So every time you need to switch something, you're taking out a needle out of your skin. Well, plastic.
A little piece of plastic.
A little
or
piece of
metal
plastic.
Or whatever.
Whatever is taking blood sample.
Yeah.
You're taking that out of your skin every 3, 10, 14, 15 days. And then when you're applying a new one, you are using a needle to inject the new sensor. So diabetics have to go through this every time they want. Now, it is a little bit better than finger sticks. You're not doing it a couple times a day.
Right.
But it is, one, it hurts. 2, it's an inconvenience. You are wearing a machine 24/7.
Especially the tubed insulin pumps. Those can be really annoying. There's been plenty of times it gets caught on a door hook or anything rips off.
Out of your body.
Yeah.
You have
You
to,
don't always get, refills of that much stuff or anything like that. A lot of diabetics are hoarders because we'll save every little thing we can. Or I know, unfortunately, a lot of diabetics, we reuse a lot of stuff sometimes or extend the timing of what we use because
desperate.
we want to make sure that we'll have enough. So I definitely think for me, especially with the CGM, is the alerts.
a lot.
There are a lot of alerts.
Even when something maybe isn't even going wrong.
Yeah. You've got 3 days left on the sensor. It'll start telling you have 3 days left. Okay, I know that. Thank you so much. So things like that, yeah. And they're loud. They're loud alerts. Because obviously if something is wrong, they want you to know immediately. But it can be difficult to manage life with that. I go about work and sometimes it's blaring through my speaker at work and I'm having to explain then what's going on and be like, everything's fine. This is just what's going on. It's not a big deal. But it's jarring, especially.
People without diabetes, you can't even fathom wearing something on your body 24/7 that's essentially monitoring your life.
Yeah. Well, and my thing is also that these small pieces of equipment, which are, imperfect, they're not as good as your pancreas or as good as your body would be had it been quote unquote normal, regular, whatever. And when they fail, it is frustrating. It's frustrating to know that you have to rely on this kind of technology for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And just hoping that it will do its job.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of mental struggles with type 1 diabetes for sure. And I'm sure with type 2 as well. I just know that for me, because it's something that I couldn't control, it's definitely harder for me, especially as someone who does somewhat like control. But I do think that's something that a lot of people don't really think about or talk about. I just tell people chronic illness means chronic. It's all the time. You don't get to have a day off or not think about it for even a couple minutes,
Well, let's think about, like, if I have a lot of patients where their sensor fails. So logically, let's think about it. We get a prescription for 30 days. In Freestyle Libre, we get 28 days. Dexcom, you get 3 for 30 days.
Right.
If one fails, let's say Dexcom, fails on day 2 of a 10-day cycle, and you have to now use one of your other sensors, you're now fighting your doctor, if you don't have refills, of why you need an early refill.
Right.
You're fighting your insurance because the product was damaged or just human mistakes.
Yeah.
And these are not cheap. And not even in the slightest.
No.
Even a pack of 3 of Dexcom sensors are, I think, about $500 something.
Yeah.
So you're fighting insurance. You're fighting your doctor. You're then living at the same time with whatever your diabetes. So you're trying to stay alive while trying to get your medicine. Then you go to the retail pharmacy and you're trying to pick it up. And then there's nothing there to pick up. Or your insurance won't pay for it.
Right.
So now it's $500. Or Dexcom will replace it. Well, most of these companies are very good at replacing. If you call them and say there was an error, Freestyle, I know, they'll send you a coupon for free. Dexcom, I haven't really seen a free coupon. I bet it exists, but I'm not 100% sure.
Usually if you call them direct, they will send one to you, but they request that you send the other one back.
Oh, the broken one. Okay. So there are options. I will say it's a lot of work, though.
Yeah.
So this could take 5 or 6 days.
Right.
A week, 2 weeks. By that time, you could be out of sensors. It's extremely frustrating for you, the pharmacist, the doctor, your insurance.
Right.
It's a fight you have to have on your own.
Yeah.
It's your life, which is unfortunate. As a pharmacist, I'll try and help you as much as I can.
I'm grateful to be married to a pharmacist.
Yeah, I do. I help you as much as I can.
Life
and
hack.
I'm also very happy that we have good insurance that, for the most part, if I call them, they will pay for it. But not everyone is so lucky.
Right. Life hack for diabetics, though.
Just
letting you guys know.
She actually doesn't like me. She likes that I'm a pharmacist.
That's not true.
And I'm kidding. But it is helpful for you. It's helpful for me. You teach me, and I can teach my patients hacks. I mean, the amount of times that diabetics have come, I've probably never told you this, like, amount of times patients have come up to me, diabetics particularly, asking me, like how to use their CGMs, how to use their testing supplies. And just, I didn't know because we don't really get hands-on training. I maybe watched a YouTube video when it first came out because this didn't really exist when I was in school. And the only reason I know it is from watching you and helping you. So it's something that I can help my patients with at least. But it's something that people without diabetes or who have not been, you guys don't think about. I mean, why would you? You don't think about this kind of stuff.
I don't know how to change a colostomy bag. Like, there's things I don't understand.
There's things you don't understand. But that's why we know. So in case you're walking down the street, someone's having a hypoglycemic attack, we know what it looks like. We can help. Or we can get someone that can help.
Yeah.
I'm all about it. So we talked about insulin. We talked about CGMs for type 1 diabetics. CGMs are also used in type 2 diabetics.
Yes.
All it is blood glucose monitoring, right?
A lot of people who don't actually have any kind of blood glucose issues now use them, I guess, in the fitness
just to monitor,
industry. Yeah.
I've heard of that. Yeah, a lot of fitness people are using it just to see what food does to their body. But let's talk about type 2 diabetes. Insulin's a last resort.
Right.
ADA, or the American Diabetes Association, has set out treatment guidelines, and so I'm just going to go through those real quick. So first-line therapy is one, lifestyle changes. No matter how advanced your diabetes is, we have to think about lifestyle changes. Focus on healthy diet, regular exercise, and weight management. And the next first-line treatment is metformin, which we probably have all heard of.
Right.
It's a very common medication. It's the first-line medicine. It helps improve insulin sensitivity and reduce glucose production in the liver. So you have your second-line options. These are the medications I spoke about last episode, so going to keep you on your toes. So we got your GLP-1 receptor agonists, which are...
Ozempic.
Any other ones you can name?
Wegovy.
Wegovy's for weight loss. Yeah, not for diabetes. But yes, it is in the same category.
Okay.
But we use it only for weight loss.
Right.
So we got Trulicity.
Right.
Victoza. Kind of thing. Manjaro.
Oh, Manjaro.
And we already covered that. I'm not going to teach you guys again because I beat it to the ground.
Yeah.
Then we got your SGLT2 inhibitors, which are... No idea. Jardiance and Farxiga. And then we have our third line options, which are your DPP-4 inhibitors like Januvia, your sulfonylureas or TZDs, and then for more advanced, we have insulin therapy.
Right.
Okay. And treatment goals. As a diabetic, what has your doctor spoke to you about treatment goals?
Basically, my treatment goals are to keep my blood sugars within a certain range.
What's your goal? What is your blood glucose goal?
Oh, mine, usually they want me to be around 120 to 150 is what I was told when I was first diagnosed. Nobody's ever given me a new one.
Interesting. So your homework now is to go to your doctor next appointment and ask them what your goals are. Because, I mean, how do you know if you're doing well if there's no goal?
Right.
So treatment guidelines for ADA, American Diabetes Association, is listed as an A1C below 7% for most adults. And blood sugar targets before meals 80 to 130 milligrams per deciliter, or after meals below 180.
Okay.
Does that seem like something that you kind of aim for?
Similar. Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to talk
no.
Like, is that realistic?
No, that's definitely realistic. Some people do trend a little higher than that normally. I would say I'm probably one of those people. But yes, I'm not often consistently 80 to 90. I'll say that.
Okay. So with these technological advances, diabetes management has become more precise, helping individuals better control their blood sugar with less effort. So this episode, we learned about CGMs. We learned about insulin pumps. We learned about pods, like Omnipod, delivers insulin. I was going to give you a tough pop quiz, but I feel like my first pop quiz was tough.
Yeah.
So I'll just do an easy one.
Okay. You can try both, but we'll see.
So we'll just do an easy one. And it'll be a little bit from earlier in Talk Nerdy. Okay, let's see how well you did. So we're going to go back to our diagnostic test.
Okay.
Let's see how much you remember. So we have our A1C.
Yeah.
For pre-diabetes, what is the range for the diagnostic test?
So
I can give you a hint if you need.
I know that normally we want to be in the mid 5s. So I would say pre-diabetes, if I remember correctly, is about 5.5 is it 5.7 to like 6.34?
4.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have normal, below 5.7.
Right.
Pre-diabetic, 5.7 to 6.4. And diabetes, which is 6.5 or higher. So, second part of the pop quiz, that might be a little bit harder.
I'll just say this. When I was first diagnosed, I was 10 years old. My A1C was 13.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was active.
I mean, there's a lot of people out there walking around with a 13 and they just don't know about it.
Oh, yeah.
So, everyone get your blood work done. Go see a doctor once a year. Minimum. So, this is what your hard pop quiz is going to be.
Okay.
So, our A1C, it's not like I'm going to get my blood work today.
Right.
And then go get my blood work next week and my A1C be different.
Right.
How often does our A1C change?
3 months.
3 months. Wow, it wasn't even hard. I thought it was harder than.
No,
You're
that
just
one
getting
was easier
smarter.
than the other one.
Oh, it was?
Yes.
Look at me. I'm a nerd. I'm
Especially
sorry.
because I go to my endocrinologist every 3 months, and that's when we do.
I didn't even
my
think about
A1C
that.
test.
Of course
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I'm so silly. I'm
You're
such a
not silly.
nerd. I just figured numbers would be easier. It's because I'm a nerd. I'm sorry.
Numbers are harder for me.
I got you. So that's it. We did it. Episode 3.
Wow, exciting.
I want to thank everyone for joining us on this episode of The Medicine Murders. Understanding conditions like diabetes and the treatments available not only empowers us to help others, but also ensures we advocate for the safe use of life-saving technology. If you found today's episode insightful, please consider listening to the other 2 episodes because I mentioned them in this episode. And after today's episode, I'll probably have a haircut.
Yay.
Andy's excited about that. Maybe I'll post it on social media, but I am new to social media, so I don't know how to do a lot of stuff. So follow us on social media for maybe a haircut reveal and for more discussions about the intersection of healthcare and true crime. As always, my email, social media handles, and all sources are in the show notes. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. And just remember, you don't need a prescription for murder.
Dun, dun, dun. I would also like to say, please everyone have a great and safe holiday season. Thanksgiving's coming up, whether or not you celebrate. Let's just try and get through the rest of this holiday season.
Dun, dun, dun. Just kidding. I just wanted to do that.